If you've never been to Newfoundland, it's hard to grasp just how massive and empty the wilderness there really is. A few years ago, I decided to tackle a solo trek across the island. My route was the TURE Way, a massive 800-kilometer dirt trail that follows the path of an old, dismantled railway line. It cuts straight through the heart of the Canadian backcountry, far away from major highways or towns. The rules were simple: walk until my legs gave out, and pitch my tent wherever I happened to land when the sun went down. For the first few days, it was incredible. Just me, my pack, and the endless stretch of gravel beneath my boots. But solo hiking does something to your head after a while. The silence starts to feel heavy. You become hyper-aware of every snapped twig, every shift in the wind. It was late afternoon on a Tuesday when the landscape shifted. The dense wall of pine trees finally broke open, and I stumbled into what looked like an old cottage community right off the edge of the line. But something was immediately wrong. There were no cars, no smoke coming from chimneys, no voices. As I walked deeper into the settlement, the realization hit me. This place was completely abandoned. It looked like a ghost town from a modern apocalypse. I passed rusted-out trailers with shattered windows, wheels sinking into the mud. Further down, the burnt-out shell of an old school bus conversion sat rotting in the high grass. The small wooden cabins nearby were completely shuttered up, their plywood doors rotting off the hinges. It was deeply unsettling, but I'm not going to lie, it was fascinating too. It felt like stepping into a time capsule that everyone had suddenly fled. By now, the sun was dipping below the tree line, the sky was turning a bruised, dark purple, and the temperature was dropping fast. In the woods, once the light starts to go, it goes quickly. I knew I didn't have the time or the energy to push past this town to find a normal clearing. I had to make camp right here. I found a mostly empty lot near the edge of the property. The only landmark was an old, rusted pickup truck parked near the back of the clearing. It was tilted at a horrific angle, slowly sliding backward into a deep ravine that bordered the lot. I set up my tent a safe distance from the edge, pulled out my portable stove, and quickly boiled some water for a basic meal. The entire time I was eating, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. You know that prickle on the back of your neck? The kind that makes you want to look over your shoulder every 5 seconds? I kept staring at the dark, empty windows of the cabins surrounding me. I told myself it was just an overactive imagination. The wind was picking up, making the rusted tin roofs of the old structures creak and groan. Once dinner was done, I cleaned up, packed away my food so it wouldn't attract bears, and crawled inside my tent. I zipped the rainfly shut, climbed into my sleeping bag, and tried to block out the eerie atmosphere. Eventually, exhaustion won, and I drifted off to sleep. I don't know what time it was when my eyes snapped open. The world outside was pitch black. The wind had died down completely. Everything was dead silent. Then I heard it. Crunch. A distinct, sharp sound just a few yards from my tent. My heart instantly leaped into my throat. I froze, holding my breath, listening with every fiber of my being. At first, my brain tried to rationalize it. A deer? A stray moose? Maybe a small animal scavenging for scraps? No. These weren't the erratic four-legged patterns of an animal. It was a heavy, deliberate rhythm. 2 feet. A human being was walking through the gravel and dead leaves outside. The steps were pacing slowly, moving with terrifying intent. They grew closer and closer until they were right next to the thin nylon wall of my tent. My chest felt so tight I could barely breathe. Then the footsteps began to circle me. Whoever it was, they were walking a slow, agonizing perimeter around my sleeping body. A wave of pure adrenaline hit my system. In the middle of nowhere, trapped inside a zipped tent, you are incredibly vulnerable. A tent offers no protection. It's just a body bag if someone wants it to be. If someone is approaching you in total darkness, miles from civilization, They aren't looking to make friends. They are looking to do harm. Remaining as silent as possible, I slipped my right hand out of the sleeping bag. I reached down and gripped the handle of my hunting knife. I slowly slid it out of the sheath, making sure the metal didn't make a single click. My plan was simple, desperate, and brutal. If that zipper moved, if the fabric tore, I was going to stab blindly through the darkness first and ask questions later. It was survival mode, plain and simple. For what felt like an eternity, the footsteps lingered just outside. I waited for the sound of hands brushing against the rainfly. I waited for a breath, a whisper, a voice. Nothing. Just the slow, heavy treading of boots in the dirt. And then, miraculously, the steps began to drift away. They grew fainter, moving back toward the center of the abandoned lot, until the silence of the night swallowed them completely. I didn't move for 20 minutes. I just sat there in the dark, gripping my knife, staring at the zipper of my tent door. My mind was racing. Were they gone? Were they waiting just out of sight, watching for a light to turn on? I knew I couldn't stay until morning. If they came back with a weapon, or with more people, I was a sitting duck. I carefully unzipped the tent door, moving an inch at a time to minimize the sound. I crept out into the cold night air. I didn't dare turn on my flashlight. Giving away my exact position was out of the question. Using only the faint starlight, I blindly yanked the stakes out of the ground, crammed the tent, sleeping bag, and gear into my backpack in one chaotic, disorganized mess. I swung the heavy pack onto my shoulders, gripped my knife tightly in my right hand, and hit the trail. I didn't just walk. I marched. I put my head down and pushed forward into the dark, following the faint outline of the old railway path. Every shadow looked like a person. Every rustle of the trees made me want to run. But I just kept moving mile after mile until the sky finally began to turn gray, then orange. By the time full daylight broke, I hit a rural gravel road that crossed the trail. A few minutes later, a heavy pickup truck came rumbling down the lane. I didn't care how crazy I looked. Exhausted, pale, clothes disheveled, I flagged him down. Thankfully, the driver was an incredibly kind local guy. He saw the state I was in, told me to hop in, and drove me all the way to the nearest town. The moment we arrived, I checked into a local hotel, locked the door behind me, and took the longest shower of my life. Looking back at it now, the realization of what actually happened is the scariest part. When I look at the photos I took of that abandoned cottage town during the day, it hits me. Whoever was outside my tent didn't just stumble across me by accident in the dark. They had to have watched me walk into that ghost town from one of those shuttered cabins or burnout buses. They watched me unpack, watched me cook, and waited for the perfect moment of vulnerability to approach. I'm convinced it was a squatter living off the grid in those ruins. Maybe he was just curious. Maybe he wanted to see who was trespassing on his territory. But given how isolated that place was, I am incredibly glad I didn't stick around until sunrise to find out what he actually wanted.